Hi, and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits YouTube page. So excited to bring to you guys another video. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to make a video in a while. If you hadn't noticed, it's been just Rob. So thank you, Rob, for picking up my slack. I've been really underperforming. But you know who hasn't been underperforming? Some of these players we're going to talk about today. And we're not just going to talk about these guys as far as, wow, look at what they did. They had great weeks. And they did have great weeks, but we all know that. We watch football. It's really this question of what can we learn from them? What do they have to offer us as far as information about what the season has to hold? And just outside of them, I don't mean a player has a good week. Wow, he's going to have a good season. I guess he is good. No, I mean, what does that tell us about trends? Trends are extremely important in fantasy, and they really help develop most of your philosophy, which is a huge part of your fantasy game. All right, so without further ado, here's my first guy that I'm going to talk about. We're going to go to a quarterback. The number one fantasy scoring quarterback this week is obviously Alex Smith. Alex Smith scored 31.02 fantasy points this week, at least in the league that I was in. He scored differently based on the league, but he probably was a number one scorer no matter what league you were in. He had an unbelievable game against a defense that a lot of people thought was going to be able to crush the Chiefs. And this is something I really wanted to talk about because it really stands for something that we have been arguing tirelessly all offseason for the past couple of years, and that's that you need to wait on your quarterback. It's just there's so many guys out there. If you were playing fantasy football this year and you were in, I don't know, probably 5 leagues, Alex Smith got drafted in maybe one league. Maybe one league. If you're in a 16-team league and you have 16 players, 8 bench, maybe somebody threw him on their bench, but let's be honest, it probably didn't happen. This guy came out of nowhere. So you know what? There's always talent. That's something that we always preach as far as quarterback and wideouts go. There's always talent out there. I mean, let's look at the guys who scored just below him. The second scoring fantasy quarterback was Bradford, another guy who probably didn't get drafted. After that was Wentz. I think he got drafted in most leagues, but typically as a backup, typically a lot later, and I don't think people really expected too much from him. After that, Simeon. Crazy Simeon, man. I really don't have too much faith in the guy, but he came out and he had a good week. And then rounding out the top 10, so there were a couple of guys like Matt Ryan and in that top 10 of fantasy scoring QBs, but the 9th and 10th fantasy scoring quarterbacks this week were Jared Goff and DeShone Kizer. Can you believe that? Alex Smith, Sam Bradford, Carson Wentz, Trevor Simeon, Jared Goff, and DeShone Kizer were all in the top 10 fantasy scoring quarterbacks. I mean, that's insane. You just have to sit back and laugh at the guys who are drafting quarterbacks in the first 5 rounds. I mean, seriously, how much talent is out there? Like I said, it just goes back to what we've been preaching, what we've been talking about. You just got to wait on a quarterback. There's always going to be talent out there. Play the matchups and just pick up guys week to week. You're going to be just fine. Moving on, we're going to go to running back. But as you probably already know, we're going to be staying to the same team, the Kansas City Chiefs, and talking about Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt had an unbelievable game. I mean, he came out of nowhere. Sure, after Spencer Ware's injury, we knew Kareem Hunt was going to do something. Whether it was spectacular or okay or good, we knew he would do something. But 40.6 points per game is unbelievable. That's crazy. No matter what league you were in, he probably scored the most points unless you're like insanely heavy PPR or something, although even then he probably still won for most running back points this week. I mean, that's an unbelievable week. What a way to come in, step into the NFL. Now, I want to clarify that I'm excited about him. Obviously, we can't expect these games every week. He can't do this every week. It's impossible. The greatest running backs of all time don't have those weeks every week. So he's going to cool off a bit. He might even cool off a lot. I mean, like, let's be honest. There are going to be games where he doesn't score and he doesn't break 50 yards rushing. Like, it just happens. It happens to all running backs. In fact, the year that Adrian Peterson ran for over 2,000 yards, his first game, he only got like 32 yards rushing. So, I like him, but don't be shaken if next week maybe he doesn't have as good of a week. But that just tells us keep drafting running backs. Keep drafting running backs, no matter when it is in the season. If you had your draft a month ago, sure, you were just taking a gamble on a backup. But look at what happened. Other guys that performed well, Mike Gillislee and Tarek Cohen. This guy comes out of nowhere. I mean, he was very athletic, but once he was drafted to the Bears, it seemed pretty obvious he wasn't a viable fantasy option. And I still don't think he's a very viable fantasy option unless something major changes there for Chicago. But nonetheless, they came in and they had good weeks. Gillislee we expected, and although lately the hype has been cooling off, but there's talented running backs out there. You got to take those shots deep in your draft. Don't stop drafting running backs. You can never have enough running backs. So that's like, I mean, if I could teach you guys one thing, that would be it. Just keep drafting running backs. So we'll move on now to wide receivers. This one's a little bit more predictable, but there's still something we can learn from them. And the number one fantasy scoring wideout this week was my man Stefon Diggs. Now I call him my man not because he's on my fantasy teams, but because I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan through and through. So excited. It was a good game. Really outplayed the Saints there, but Diggs was just phenomenal. Bradford was good, but that was mostly off of Diggs' great game. 20.7 points per game. Not a huge game. Yeah, he led the wide receivers, but it wasn't as phenomenal as Kareem Hunt or Alex Smith coming out. But it was still great. He still caught 2 touchdowns. He really dominated. And yeah, it's a little bit more predictable. I mean, it just is. Diggs is a great wideout, and most people know it and are willing to admit it. The other guy is Tyreek Hill. He came out, and I don't think he's going to have a good year. I don't trust Tyreek Hill, but he's another guy that I would wait to take late, but he still had a good week. There's so much depth at wideout. Now we're going to talk about 3 other guys that had good weeks. That 2 of them, or 3 of them, you guys probably didn't draft in your leagues. You probably didn't know 2 of these guys even. I mean, kind of came out of nowhere. Kenny Golladay, he was a guy we did in our Deep Sleepers video. We were excited about him, but man, did he come out week 1 to show us we were right. How exciting is that? Kenny Golladay had a great week. He's a wide receiver for the Detroit Lions, and I'm thinking he's the real deal. Rob made that video, and he actually made that prediction, not me, so great job, Rob. That was really smart. Moving on, the next guy is Benny Fowler. Like, who is this guy? Most people haven't even heard his name, but he was in the top 10 for fantasy scoring wide receivers this week. And then Adam Thielen. Golladay and Fowler, in a lot of leagues might have gone undrafted. I mean, if you're in a league of people who don't really know fantasy, or you're not watching our videos, or you don't have deep benches, those guys probably weren't drafted. Thielen, maybe on the border. Yeah, Hill and Diggs were, but when 3 out of the top 5 fantasy scoring wide receivers are kind of, those so-called no names, it speaks for the depth. You don't need to reach too high. You can survive. So that's something to remember. Like, if you don't have good matchups that week, you don't have good starters, you don't like what you're working with, just move on. Pick up a guy in free agency and start him. Play the hot hand. Tell you what, these wideouts they're all great. They're in the pros for a reason. They just need the opportunity. We'll move on so I not waste too much of your time trying to make this a short video. Next is tight end. Be surprised to hear it is Austin Hooper. He scored 18.8 fantasy points. And, I wasn't too big on him. And maybe this is me being wrong. Maybe he's going to be a much better fantasy option this year than I expected. I still don't think he's going to put up 18.8 points a game consistently, but he had a good game. A lot of leagues, like I've been talking about, he probably went undrafted, and so did the guys who scored after him. Next was Jess James, Jason Witten, Kobe Fleener, and Charles Clay for some of the top scoring tight ends there. A lot of these guys are going undrafted. So if you have a bad draft, don't panic. All right, don't panic. You can pick up in free agency. You can work with what you've got. It's going to be difficult, yes, but you're seeing the kind of guys who are scoring and the kind of leaders, and you're probably thinking right now, like, wow, maybe you really can make a difference. You really can recover from a bad draft. In fact, we did a video on that, and this is just proof you can recover from a bad draft. Now, it is just week 1 of the NFL. So I don't want to make too much hype about, wow, look at this, you can get guys with no name and have great weeks. But we saw this all throughout last year. If you don't believe me, keep watching this year. You'll see it. I'll make probably, you know what, if this video does well, I'm going to make this video every week. And we can just keep talking every week about how guys come out of nowhere. There's depth in the NFL. You just got to know how to find it. So now we're going to move on to another guy. Pretty deep. Unless you're a big fantasy guy, you probably don't know him. In fact, I barely know him. I'm not a big guy on studying kickers. But here we go. Giorgio Tavicchio. I believe I'm saying that right, but I probably just butchered it and offended him, and you know, whatever, who cares. The point being, guy comes out of nowhere. Another guy, did he get drafted? Probably not. I didn't even give him the second glance. I read his name, I looked at his stats, and I moved on, and there were just other kickers I targeted. Put up 19 fantasy points. I'm not saying he's a long-term fantasy option, but again, play the matchup. From week to week, nobodies, guys who aren't great, can put up great numbers. Could you imagine if your kicker got you 19 points this week? I don't know. Anybody watching, if you had him or you had another kicker who got 15 or more points, comment below how good that felt. I tell you what, those 15 points make a huge difference. In so many games I've been in, that 15-point player makes a difference from winning to losing. Especially hate being on the other side of it, but this is how you can avoid being on the other side of that, by picking up players like him week to week. Now, I don't know if he's going to be a great option next week. I'm saying he's probably not going to be. I don't predict that he'll get even close to 19 points. And I know that I'm really beating a dead horse here, but seriously, just go week to week. Pick guys up, play matchups, be smart, play the hot hand. Don't be afraid to play the hot hand. I tell you what, it works. So many times at the beginning of my fantasy career in the first couple of seasons, I had horrible drafts, and I just go week to week on nobody defenses, starting like the Jags defense or whatever, and play the right matchup. You can still win games. Speaking of the Jaguars defense, we're moving on to defense, and in fact, they're one of the defenses we're going to talk about. And the other defense is the Rams. They both tied this week for 28 fantasy points. That's crazy. That's an awesome week. Just, you gotta love that. If your defense goes out and gets you 28 points, you're like 30% of the way to a win. I mean, seriously, that right there, that's like coming in clutch by your defense. And this is a particular position where I say more than ever to do that. A lot of people who are excited about the Rams or excited about the Jaguars, and a lot of people weren't, and you get all this whatever back and forth, different opinions. People don't study defense that much. Don't worry about it. The main thing to note is just play the defense. I tell you what, anyone who's playing the Cleveland Browns probably going to have a good defensive week. Anyone who's playing the Jets going to have a great defensive week. So 100% just play the matchup. You know, this is just a reminder. I know I'm beating a dead horse here. I don't want to be annoying the guy who makes the YouTube video and he only has 1 point. But here's how important this point is. Like, look at all of these different options out there. It's crazy. I mean, I just wanted to kind of come in here and say, like, yeah, this is our philosophy. Here's the proof. I mean, this video is the proof. Like, raise your hand. Well, that was a dumb thing to say, but I mean, leave in the comments below if you honestly thought Alex Smith was going to have a good week. None of us thought that. Like, honestly, leave a comment below if you were starting Austin Hooper over, you know, Jimmy Graham or Zach Ertz or, you know, Kelsey or Gronk. Like, nobody was. Anyone who's going to make that comment and try to pretend like they did is obviously a liar. So I tell you what, don't be afraid if you have a bad draft. This is just proof of what we're saying. Go week to week, play the hot hand. You're going to be just fine. Have faith. Don't give up on your season. You know what, it's just only week 1. We're just starting to learn a little bit about the trends. It's probably not going to be till week 4 that we fully understand some of the things we need to understand to be successful this season. But like I said, if this video does well, I'll continue making more videos. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. You have a great day.